At the beginning of January, Cefic, the European Chemical Industry Council that represents large, medium and small chemical companies across Europe, shared the report developed by Advancy, a consulting company about the state of the chemical industry in Europe. A document of over 100 pages describes in detail challenges that European chemical companies face, and I feel it's really important to talk about that. Chemicals contribute from 5 to 7% of the European Union manufacturing turnover, and chemical companies give jobs to 1.2 million people, and I'm talking about direct jobs only. So it's a large industry and it's a very important industry. I believe it is fundamentally important for the whole of humanity. Today, I'm going to present some general data, so it will be a relatively short overview. While doing this overview, I'm going to also share my thoughts and some reflections and maybe ideas. But for more details, please find the link to the report in the description below and read it yourself. And I highly recommend you to do it if you're interested in the chemical industry. At some point, people watching this from other parts of the world might think, why would the situation in Europe bother us? And to me, the answer is really simple. I believe that it's always better to have a strong competitor because healthy competition makes everyone else stronger and it speeds up innovation. It makes us more creative and fosters developing new solutions. I would also be really happy to hear from those who represent the chemical industry wherever you are. What's your take on the information from the report? And what do you think about the state of the chemical industry in general? Whether it's the European industry, the American one, the Asian, or any other industry, or the world chemical industry in general. Your personal opinion truly matters just as much as those aggregated numbers from the report. Please feel free to share your insights in the comments below. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Lisa and I spent 5 years organizing collaborative university competitions for world well-known companies, helping them to solve their extreme innovation challenges. And now I continue my journey with the goal to foster innovation by helping different parties of the innovation process collaborate and co-create. On this channel, I explore collaboration projects for innovation management, share my experience in managing these projects and processes, and uncover strategies for making collaboration efforts more effective. So let's just start. First of all, the report introduces the general state of the chemical industry in Europe. And the European chemical industry consists of 3 different levels. We are talking about the upstream level, which comprises inorganics, like different fertilizers, gases, other inorganics, and organics, like petrochemicals and derivatives. The next level is about polymers and intermediates. And we have the downstream level, which includes specialty and consumer chemicals. The report claims that the European chemical sector represents about 655 billion euros in turnover and nearly 165 billion in added value, and it was in 2023. It also, as I mentioned before, gives more than 1.2 million direct jobs and represents 3 to 5 times more indirect jobs. So again, this is a huge sector of the European economy. And this sector is a network of 31,000 companies, 97% of which are small and medium enterprises. And I shouldn't mention that small and medium enterprises, these companies are the source of innovation and employment for people. The report also highlights that the chemical sector is one of the leading exporters for Europe, and it used to be on the 2nd and the 3rd places among all the export industries in the past. However, in 2023, it was ranked only the 4th. And keeping in mind a number of chemical companies, and specifically large companies like BASF, located in Germany, which is the largest chemical producer in the world, I don't think it's good that this industry is losing its place. However, Europe is still strong when it comes to innovations, which is proved by the number of patents filed and the number of grants in 2022. Now, I don't want to sound dramatic, and it's not me, okay, it's the report, and it claims that the European chemical industry is at its breaking point. So which problems do we have? According to the report, for 2023-2024, more than 11 million tons of plant capacity were said to be lost due to announced closure. We also have to deal with weak demands. Production volumes in 2023 have decreased. The authors claim the decrease was around 14% since 2021. We also face an issue with the capacity surplus, which is global, and it of course affects European companies. Utilization rate is only around 75%. And yes, we of course expect the demand to increase in the future, but still, investments happen outside Europe. One of the biggest issues that chemical companies in Europe face is, of course, the energy prices. The gas price is 4-5 times higher compared to what they have in the USA. Yes, we expect it will decline, but it will still remain 2-3 times higher than there. It's going to be better, but just a little bit. And this influences the upstream level of the chain, because this level and companies of this level require a lot of energy. And Europe is also not on the first place when it comes to energy prices from crude oil, naphtha, and ethane. Other countries have advantages here. Let's add another problem, another big challenge for the chemical companies in Europe, and it's regulations, of course. My favorite, not really topic. We all know how it works in Europe with regulations. We don't need to mention it. But let's look at all these problems in detail, in more detail. And here comes my favorite table from the whole report. What do we see on this table? There are price/cost competitiveness factors, which include energy and feedstocks costs, environmental and regulatory costs, labor costs, logistics costs, capital costs, and subsidies and taxes. And we also have non-price competitiveness factors, which include innovation, human capital, supply/demand, ecosystem, and industrial and trade policies. 2 pluses mean positive impact, 2 minuses, negative impact, and we also have 1 plus, neutral, and minus in between, which also characterize how different factors impact the industry in different regions. Now, according to this table, the European Union has the biggest advantages in logistics costs, which is understandable. I believe here we have a well-developed transportation system and infrastructure. Then we have advantages in innovation, which is also true, at least for now, and human capital, which is also understandable because Europe has a very good education system. We have a high rate of people who receive higher education here, also because of the heritage, the level of industrialization. It was always high here in Europe. We had a lot of people working in chemical companies. So we have built a strong knowledge transfer system. Europeans are also creative. Let's give them that. Also here on the table, you can see that we have capital costs and the supply/demand factors as factors with positive impact. And though I trust this table and people who prepared it, I still have my concerns regarding capital costs, specifically when it comes to access to capital and time and amount of investment. I honestly don't think it's that positive here in Europe to give it 1 plus, but that's just my opinion based on some conversations I have, some stats, etc. But okay, whatever. Now let's talk about the issues. So we have issues with most price and cost competitiveness factors. Things like energy feedstocks, we've already discussed it here, prices are really high. Then we're talking about environmental and regulatory costs. obviously, this is another big issue in Europe. There are so many regulations to implement, and the industry is really struggling with them. It's a well-known fact. Then there is labor costs. Running a business in Europe is expensive, salaries are high, taxes are even higher, and productivity as a part of the labor costs factor isn't that strong here either. On top of that, subsidies and fiscal support are difficult to get while taxes remain high. When it comes to non-price competitiveness factors, the lowest ranking one is industrial and trade policies. This system is complicated, there is no coherence, no simplicity, and each country has their different rules. So these factors, they negatively impact the chemical industry in Europe, and as you can see, the position of the European companies compared to companies in other regions, yeah, it's definitely not that strong. But let's look at other regions as well. Now here what we see, the US stands out as a leader. They've got access to affordable energy and feedstock, and they are doing really well in terms of capital costs. Their subsidies and tax policies are also quite favorable. Innovation, strong. Education, even stronger. They have world-renowned universities and research centers. We know that that's true. And their immigration system, I believe, has always attracted talents from all over the world, including European experts. That's true. We don't have such a great immigration policy here in Europe, I think, and I'm telling this as an immigrant, actually. And in terms of industrial and trade policies, well, as you can see, the US is in a much better position than Europe. Then there is China. Interestingly, we don't really see any major weaknesses in their competitiveness. The US does struggle with high labor costs. Hiring people is expensive, we know that, salaries and taxes are high, but China is performing strongly across all factors. Another region worth mentioning, I believe, is the Gulf states. They have their downsides. They are not as advanced in innovation, but they don't have a strong industrial history, and their education system isn't on the same level as the European or the one in the US, but overall, they are competitive. Their biggest weak spot is human capital, but they're working on it. Now let's get back to Europe. As I mentioned before, we're really strong in innovation. There is a lot of investment in R&D, a high number of patents, and a strong academic and research ecosystem. But the question is, can we keep our talent here? Our talent that actually is responsible for these strong factors, because right now other regions can offer European experts what we can't. That's what I think. This is my opinion. It's not just the US, but let's look at the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia is opening up, and the United Arab Emirates has always been a hub for global talent. These governments, they understand the need for specialists, and they're actively bringing in experts from other countries. I believe they will be doing it even more in the future. Now, of course, most European professionals working in the Gulf will return home eventually. They're going to make their money and they will come back. But even if we lose them just for a couple of years, that's still a loss of knowledge and expertise for Europe. Meanwhile, these other regions will strengthen their human capital. So in my opinion, over time, human capital in the Gulf states will improve. Their governments are encouraging locals to work more in their industries, and eventually this factor might turn from a weakness into a strength. At the end of the day, this is something Europe needs to remember, because right now and here in this video, we're of course talking about how to help companies, we're talking about the industry in general, but it's also important to remember to support people, to support our professionals so that we can utilize our strengths. And our strength, our main strength is people, talented professionals that we have here. And we need to make sure that European talent has opportunities to thrive here in Europe so that they can use their skills and they can be valued for their skills. Now let's quickly take a look at another table here. It's competitiveness scoring, from which we can see that the US, India and Gulf states improved their positions compared to what they had in 2008. China has improved their position significantly. They went from competitive cost regions, basically from being a region that relied on their cost competitiveness factors, to most competitive regions, meaning they now rely on all the different factors. And based on the previous table that we've seen, it is understandable why they belong now to another quadrant. Japan and South Korea lost their positions a bit, and the European Union lost quite a lot over the past 15 years, and it's getting close. It's on the border with the quadrant of cost-challenged regions, which is a risky position. It's definitely not what we want to achieve. Now, talking about all these factors, the authors of the report also came up with some actions to prevent the European industry from losing its positions, and they are asking for an urgent change of EU industrial policy. The reasons are that the current one is more about regulations rather than incentives. It's also too complex and doesn't help with creating a competitive environment. European companies, they have higher operating costs because of the current policies, and that's what we see, and that's just the harsh truth. The authors of the report also suggest looking at regional policies. What we have there is that governments of other countries like China and the United States and India, they come up with measures to support, to aid their local industries. What do chemical companies have in Europe? Looks like the European government wants to prevent our companies from success. That's something that you might think when you look at measures that we have here. As it is estimated, 24% of all active trade defense measures in force are for the chemical industry. And we have more regulations for our companies that can be avoided by other players. We expect from our companies what is not expected from companies from other regions. To me, it looks like we do not protect what is ours. We do not cherish it. But if we don't do that, how can we expect other governments to care about our businesses? Unfortunately, to me, it is really unfortunate. It is clear that globalization is no longer a popular term. I'm a big fan of collaborating, and I'm a big fan of collaborating with all the different people and researchers and companies and organizations from all over the world. And we get back to protecting and closing our markets. So yeah, what Europe should do is to, I believe, finally start to care about its enterprises, just because nobody else will. Now, as we're talking about regulations as one of the main factors why the European chemical industry is getting weaker, I want to remind you about these 97% of small and medium enterprises that represent this industry in Europe. I think they are the most vulnerable parties here when it comes to regulations, because large enterprises, they can afford hiring lawyers, creating departments that could deal with regulations. They often follow their rigid processes. It's easier for them to adapt. For small and medium companies, it's about an additional financial, and not only financial burden, it's also a time burden that they have to face and deal with. Actually, this famous Draghi report highlights regulations as one of the main problems for European competitiveness. Unfortunately, from the recent information that Ursula von der Leyen has shared about this new European competitiveness compass, I didn't hear a lot about easing down regulations. It was mentioned that they plan to alleviate regulations for small and medium companies. I do really hope that it will eventually become easier for small and medium businesses to operate. Now, what about the general market share of the European chemical industry? Well, the report states that the market share dropped by around 11 percentage points over the past 15 years. The reasons are the following. Domestic demand doesn't grow as it was before. The industry is quite mature. The market is quite mature here. Then there's also lack of competitiveness compared to players from other regions, and export markets also show a weaker growth. And of course, we're talking about not having enough investment, and competitiveness in the domestic market is also not so good. Now, just out of curiosity, I checked it separately. It was not mentioned in the report, but I was interested about how BASF is doing, because BASF is the largest chemical producer, and in 2023, their revenue plunged to 68.9 billion euros from 87.3 billion in 2022. And according to their latest news release, it looks like it continued to decline in 2024 because their preliminary results show revenue of 65.3 billion euro. Their EBITDA before special items in 2022 was 10.8 billion euro, in 2023 7.7 billion euro, and in 2024 it is expected to get to 7.9 billion euro, which is not a big change. I said it is expected, but of course the year is over. We just don't have the final numbers. The report for the last year has not been presented yet. I also checked these numbers for another big European player. I'm talking about Covestro. Their sales declined by 20% in 2023, and their EBITDA is expected to be between 1 billion euro and 1.25 billion euro, and it was 1.7 billion euro in 2022. Now let's talk about actions. Which actions do the authors of the report propose? Basically, what Letta and Draghi report suggest. Let's just briefly cover that. We're talking about developing a clear industrial policy that is going to support business in Europe. We are also talking about reducing administrative burden and finding ways to stimulate investments. Then it's about solving the problem of energy costs, energy competitiveness, working on competitive feedstocks. Then it's about financial support, support of innovation and modernization, about equal conditions, creating these equal conditions with other regions. Then it's about strategic and supporting strategic autonomy and security of supply, and also pushing customer industries and consumer demand, particularly for high-end, added value, net zero, low carbon, and circular products. They do not provide more detailed recommendations, but I believe the direction is clear, and it's the direction for the European government. Personally, I do not like to rely on anyone or anything. I do not like to depend on anything and depend on government as well. But the biggest issue that I see is that the main factors that influence competitiveness of the European chemical companies are not really factors that companies can change themselves. But I think that it doesn't mean they should just wait while the government is doing something. There is always an option to adjust and do what you can in the current circumstances. And I have already mentioned that, in my opinion, it is important to consolidate without the government approval and nudge. Let's just remember the time of the pandemic, because many businesses were in a difficult situation, and the crisis was not a crisis of just one company, but of industries and countries. And it was also the time when the companies had very little control over the situation. And we have some examples that allowed businesses to get through with minimal losses. We can talk about what Nike did. They decentralized their US operations, for example. They opened some new regional service centers. They accelerated automation. They also partnered with local carriers in the US through their special initiative to expedite deliveries. Or let's just remember how vaccines were developed, when everyone was happy to share knowledge, and thousands of people and organizations collaborated in order to find the solution. And I strongly believe that collaboration is one of the answers. Collaboration in general helps to face extreme challenges and overcome them. The clients we work with, they always have so many different limitations, and they always have this pressure either from competitors or from the government or from suppliers. And it's a natural thing when you run an innovation project for the industry to have these many limitations. But that's something we were always able to deal with. And that's what the European industry is facing now. A lot of limitations, which still, I believe, can be overcome if we work together, if all the different organizations work together. And though, as I mentioned, it looks like we failed a globalization attempt this time, the advantage of Europe is that there are so many different countries united, and each of these countries has their own strengths and their own top industries and talents and technological traditions. I believe that we need to use it, and Europe needs to use it. And I strongly believe that a crisis is the time to act, to move, to come up with innovative approaches, to find new disruptive models and products which might be... It's difficult to do for large industrial players. It's difficult to innovate and come up with some radical and disruptive innovations, but still, it's possible. And we have so many small and medium companies, which is, it's easier for them to innovate. And I believe there is always a way forward. Sometimes it is really important to make bold and risky decisions. The European industry has its strengths, and I also hope that it has enough courage, which is important in tough times. Anyway, I believe companies know what to do, they do what they want, and this is just my thoughts and my reflections on the report. I will also quickly mention that the report also has details on each point that I mentioned, about the current situation, about threats and enablers for the industry. It has information about competitiveness gap based on analysis of the situation with 9 different chemicals, 3 per each level: upstream, polymers and intermediates, and downstream, and why the chemical industry is essential for Europe. And it is essential for Europe, but not only for Europe. As I said, it is essential for the humanity in general. Now, I believe it's a great paper. It's worth reading it. Again, it's the link to the paper is in the description to this video. And I also want to say that I think that we should stop seeing business as our enemy, as our competitor. We are all a part of the same system, the same environment. Companies, large, medium, small companies are part of this system. We prosper when our companies, when our business prosper, when taxes are paid, the salaries are higher, and we can support more important social projects. Companies, they bring innovations to the market that we can use to make our lives better. Without business and without companies, breakthroughs and innovations would stay in the lab and would never be used. And I personally don't see a point in science that doesn't make our life better. So we should see business as our ally, and we are all in this together. Chemical industry also provides a way towards our sustainable future, which is impossible without chemical companies. It's an essential player to ensure a circular economy. We cannot do it without chemical companies. That's why we need to cooperate and to work together. Do I believe in the bright future of the chemical industry in Europe? I want to believe. The future is uncertain. What I know for sure is that we need to do what we can do and just hope that it's gonna turn out the way we want. I hope this video was useful for you. I hope it provided you with some insights and food for thought that eventually will become actions. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section below. Again, I'm looking forward to hear from anyone who is involved in the chemical industry anywhere in the world, what your thoughts are. It would be really great to hear them. And meanwhile, I hope that you're having a great day, and I hope to see you next time with the next video. And have a good one. Bye!